So, welcome to Edge Industry Review Fireside Chat. I'm Jim Davis, editor of Edge Industry Review. Digital infrastructure company Equinix recently announced a key component of its sustainability strategy, the opening of its first co-innovation facility, CIF, at its campus in Ashburn, Virginia. So why is sustainability important to edge computing? Well, recently we can look to things like the Netherlands halting a Facebook data center for sustainability reasons. And the city of Amsterdam itself also paused data center builds for a year in 2019. Now, although regional and access edge data centers don't consume as much power as a Facebook data center, there are going to be more of them, so it's something that the industry should be aware of. Data centers, which power edge computing in public and private cloud networks worldwide, account for an enormous amount of energy use. Equinix cites figures of 8% of electricity globally. Put in the perspective of a country, for example, data centers are on pace to consume 1% of electricity in Canada. Now, Equinix announced a bold net zero emissions goal by 2030, and the CIF will be an important part of that effort. The company is working with partners to trial and develop innovations in areas such as liquid cooling, high-density cooling, intelligent power management, and on-site prime power generation. To do this, Equinix is partnering with companies such as Bloom Energy, ZutaCore, Virtual Power Systems, and Natron Energy. So to learn more about the subject, we're talking today with David Hall, Fellow Technology and Architecture at Equinix. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, David.
Hey, Jim. How you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. So tell us some more about Equinix's sustainability efforts and how this particular program came about.
Sure. So the co-innovation facility, essentially, we build these assets that have kind of 25-year lifetimes, and by the time you put something in the ground, by the time you install some assets, it's kind of too late to change your mind, right? So as we were kind of thinking about these new types of data centers that we might want to build in the future, we realized that there was this opportunity to create an environment where we could test some of the ideas that we had before we deployed them in kind of shovel-ready projects. So it was really that, it was the opportunity to do something in an environment that wasn't a customer environment, where we didn't have to worry about our main mission, which is kind of delivering the power and cooling that customers expect, but where we could test some new things with some new partners. So that was the co-innovation facility. I think that initially we'd said that these are all a load of important things that we want to do there, but the big thing that customers are asking us about at the moment is how are you going to get to this net zero position. So a lot of the focus on our kind of first projects and stuff has been around sustainability, but sustainability, keeping the same levels of availability, all of those things that we want to be able to do, but how do we do them in that kind of edge form factor? So that was really the genesis of the co-innovation facility, and we sort of started thinking about what projects, what things we thought were really important. The ones you touched on, so using fuel cells to operate data centers in island modes. Obviously, one of the challenges as we build more data centers in more places is how we're going to be able to power those data centers, how we're going to get access to the HV feeds that we need. So really, the CIF, we decided we would test for the first time, a different approach to deploying power. So here we're operating in an island mode. We don't have any generators. We don't have any UPSs. It's the kind of configuration that we can imagine if you were going to build large numbers of kind of micro edge data centers. You sort of think that this is the kind of configuration that you might want. Liquid cooling is super important for Equinix, so we have two things that we're thinking about there. So the first is that we're seeing these people wanting to do new things in our data centers, right? So the things that are driving that are things like machine learning. Machine learning runs really well on these massively parallel processors. These massively parallel processors have got a bunch of transistors. They're creating a bunch of heat, and we kind of see the writing on the wall for air cooling with those. So the kind of, I guess, the driving form factor there is wanting to be able to host these next generation of applications, but then we're also thinking, wow, how are we going to do that and meet these net zero sustainability goals? And liquid cooling is an interesting one. You're going to have to ask me about my first ever job in data centers but it seems like liquid cooling is kind of back in vogue, and it's something we really wanted to test and be able to show customers and kind of get operational experience with, right? The one thing that's been consistent in our business for a very long time is air, and moving from air to liquid is a big transformation. So really kind of getting comfortable with that. And then, the software piece is super important, right? In data centers at the moment, everything essentially operates at the same level of availability. You can imagine in a scenario where you're operating edge data centers, or even the current ones, you've got different applications that have different levels of criticality, and looking at things like software-defined power so we can be more sophisticated around how we're delivering the resilience to those applications is something that we think is important anyway, but even more important in that kind of edge scenario.
Well, I think you were starting to touch on it there. Obviously, Equinix is known for building fairly sizable facilities and has been pursuing, ever larger facilities as they go after hyperscale providers. But maybe a little more around what is your thinking around the edge data center market and how the program innovations might impact that part of the market. It sounds a little bit like you're thinking towards an era where Equinix is also at that side of the equation.
Well, it's a great question about what the edge is. So I think it's quite well known now, the kind of Hunter S. Thompson quote about the edge, where no one knows exactly where the edge is because the only people that know have gone over it and they don't come back. So essentially, every data center is an edge, right? Whenever you have interconnection between two networks, it is an edge of some variety. So I think Equinix data centers have always been edge data centers, and so that doesn't really change. I think there's a question about whether or not there are applications that are going to require more numerous data centers and probably smaller data centers. I think there's a lot of people talking about those. It's not obvious that there are tons of applications for it at the moment. I guess the one that's sort of prototypical is 5G, really in 5G, it's a sort of subset of 5G. It's beamforming is the thing that has to be done with low latency and requires a bit of compute. But it certainly doesn't require like 400 kilowatt data centers. It can be done on a mast. 5G is going to enable breakout of traffic closer to those edge locations. If people want to do stuff on that traffic and there are applications, then 5G provides a mechanism for doing it. But it's not obvious. I don't know anyone can point to any particular applications where those ultra low levels of latency are required at the moment. So I think for Equinix, we build data centers of different sizes, right? We've built kind of cable landing station data centers, which are often smaller. There are particular markets like Bordeaux. We announced a data center relatively recently, which we built from a kind of modular approach. So there's a variety, right? You talk about our xScale business for sure. Our xScale business for the hyperscalers tends to be at that larger range. But I think the key thing for Equinix really is about making sure that we can deliver digital infrastructure to customers wherever they happen to want that digital infrastructure. And at the moment, they want it in the kind of 10, 15, 20 megawatt traditional IBXs, or in, for xScale customers, these much larger locations. But should that change, it's obviously important for us to understand what those smaller locations might look like.
Well, so do you have some timelines for when some of these innovations might start to appear in Equinix facilities?
So, I think...
I guess on a production basis versus experimental.
We have, I guess, sort of POC production liquid cooling deployments now with customers. It's hard to sometimes measure exactly when something becomes production or POC, but essentially these are kind of paid customer deployments where customers are deploying liquid cooling. We have Equinix a couple of years ago bought a company called Packet. We know customers love that experience of colo, but they don't necessarily love the time it takes to get stuff into colo. So Packet and now Equinix Metal is essentially a mechanism by which we can get customers' physical infrastructure quicker. We've been working real close with the Metal team about that next generation of Equinix Metal infrastructure, and that will support liquid cooling. So, we're going to bring it to customers in different ways. I think we'll bring it to our colo customer base and say, hey, colo customers, these are the kind of platforms that we support and that we've tested. This is our experience operating them, but being neutral's super key to our DNA. So I think we're not going to exclude too many options apart from the bad ones. And then, we'll for our metal customers, they'll be able to consume liquid cooling because essentially it can become the default option. And I think that that's really important. More and more we're seeing customers say, well, actually, sustainability is kind of the product, right? We expect you to provide a sustainable product. We expect you to operate a business that's going to be here tomorrow and the next day. And, we really think that sustainability is a key part of that. So I think that we'll bring it to customers in different ways. So probably liquid cooling, I think, is at the front of that. But can I foresee there are markets we operate in, like Dublin, the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, where grid is very constrained. Is it attractive for us to look at operating data centers in island mode in those markets? For sure, we definitely are doing that. And I think you'll likely see from us some data centers in the near future which don't have HV connections or aren't reliant on HV connections for their primary source of power. Those kind of timelines, like this year for liquid cooling, next couple of years for the kind of island mode power supplies, if not maybe a little sooner in some places.
Well, so I don't know if Equinix Metal is a part of this or not, if all of their infrastructure is just in Equinix facilities or sometimes in others, but it's tied to this question. Will the innovations come to market at other data center facilities other than Equinix facilities?
Yeah, so, part of what we do is, we're here to serve our customers, but we're also human beings, right? And, there's a huge group of people inside Equinix who are really motivated by making sure that, that planet Earth essentially, is a great place to live. And we don't see more than 1.5 degrees of warming, because we know that that's going to be real bad for the planet. It's I would love for everyone to host with Equinix, right? But the reality is not everyone will host with Equinix. And so I also am a human being that exists in the world where not everyone hosts with Equinix. So one of the things that we said right from the start with the co-innovation facilities that we were going to talk about this stuff a lot more, right? And we'd be much more open about it and share our experiences. So we're bringing vendors into the environment. None of those vendors are operating under kind of strict NDAs. When they go develop stuff, they're free to go sell it to other people as well. And we want them to sell it up to other people, right? We want Citigroup to be successful. We want VPS and Natron to be successful. Essentially, the more successful they are, the lower the cost of their product and the more places that we can put their product to make it useful. So I think that we really tried to make this a kind of really open environment. The platform that we're building for Equinix Metal is the Linux Foundation's only hardware platform, which is Open 19. We're investing significantly in revision 2 of Open 19, which is totally open, so anyone can go and consume it, and they should. It's going to deliver 30-40% reduction in power consumption per server if you operate it with liquid cooling, which is just fantastic. Why not do that? Everyone should be considering operating these kind of environments. So I think that, for sure, we have shareholders we have to respond to and customers that we have to respond to, and I think that Equinix is always going to be successful, serving those constituents. I think that we'll be more successful in an environment where we're talking about this stuff, and our competitors can look at this and find ways of incorporating some of these technologies into their own data centers and their own platforms.